Okay, let's start with the euthanasia. Euthanasia. Here. This is going to be also, it's going to introduce a lot of people to a new, unless people know of the mental issue. Brussels ISIS bombing survivor. How do I get this to be? Okay, hold on. How do I get rid of the ad? Okay, Brussels ISIS bombing survivor Shanti Decourt, 23, dead by euthanasia. October 8th. What's the date today? This story made the rounds last week. And some people thought it was Canada, because if it's not Canada today, it's going to be Canada very soon. Dead by euthanasia. Cause of death, euthanasia. There's a word for that. A young woman who survived. Let me just make sure we're seeing the same thing here. Sorry, peeps. Okay, we're good. A young woman who survived an ISIS bombing chose euthanasia rather than live with the trauma, according to a report. Shanti Decourt was a 17-year-old student traveling with her classmates when ISIS terrorists detonated a bomb. The 2016 blast. Decourt was not physically injured in the attack, but endured years of panic attacks and depression afterward, the Mirror reported. She tried to end her life twice, 2018, 2020, posted regularly on social media about her struggles. And this is Shanti Decourt. It says, J'ai ri et pleuré. I laughed and cried jusqu'au tout dernier jour, just until the last day. J'ai aimé et j'ai eu le droit de ressentir. I loved and I had the right to feel things, to have emotions. Ce qu'était le véritable amour, that which was the true love. Les larmes de l'amour coulaient, the tears of love ran, doucement sur mon visage, gently on my face. Je vais maintenant, what is it? Partir en paix. I'm now going to leave in peace. Sachez que vous me manquez déjà. Know that I miss you already. And then, by the way, here's another thing that she posted. With all the medications I take, I feel like a ghost that can't feel anything anymore. Maybe there were other solutions than medications. Maybe there were other solutions than medications, she wrote in one post. She chose to be euthanized earlier this year, which is legal in Belgium. She died on May 7 after 2 psychiatrists signed off on her request. And where prosecutors began an investigation into her case after this guy, a neurologist, and the CHU, Academic Clinical Hospital in Brussels, made complaints that the young woman's decision to end her life was made prematurely. Only by 60 to 70 years, depending on lifespan in Belgium. The case was closed after it found no violations had been made in the process for being euthanized. No violations had been made in the process. When you legalize criminality, it's no longer illegal. It's like, they didn't break any rules because we legalized euthanasia for the mentally ill. No, but we were just following the rules, and the rules were followed. Therefore, no crime because we legalized the crime. This is all in my humble opinion, people, just so you know. Not accusing anybody of formal crimes, although other people probably would. The euthanizing of an otherwise healthy young woman, some people would call that state-sanctioned murder. But what's even worse, in the story itself, in the details of the story, by her own admission, by her own statements, she's on medications, she's suffering from depression, she feels like a ghost. Some of you might not have ever heard of this condition. It comes from, it can come from physical trauma to the brain, and it can also come from depression. It can come from psychosis, from schizophrenia. It is known as Cotard delusion, or Cotard. We see this? Sometimes people who suffer tremendous loss, the loss of a child, the loss of a loved one, I won't say claim, they suffer from this. It triggers this condition. Cotard's delusion. Let me just shrink it so we can see the text a little better here. That's better. Also known as walking corpse syndrome or Cotard's syndrome, is a rare mental disorder in which the affected person holds the delusional belief that they are dead, do not exist, are putrefying, I guess that means, okay, rotting, or have lost their blood or internal organs. Statistical analysis of 100 patient cohort indicated that denial of self-existence is present in 45% of the cases of Cotard syndrome. In the other 55%, the patients presented with delusions of immortality. In 1880, Jules de Cotard described the condition as le délire de négation, the delirium of negation, a psychiatric syndrome of varied severity. A mild case characterized by despair and self-loathing, while severe cases characterized by intense delusions of negation or chronic psychiatric depression. Signs and symptoms. Delusions of negation are the central symptom of Cotard syndrome. The patient usually denies their own existence, the existence of body parts, yada, yada. I don't know if when she says she felt like a ghost, I can only, what's the word when you are, when you can feel someone else's pain? People, what's the word? I'm going to miss it. Empathetic. Through empathy, I can only imagine what she was feeling. When she says she feels like a ghost, I can understand how someone who went through that psychological trauma, totally detached, suffering from depression, on medications, and then consents at the age of 23 to being euthanized by the state. There are some people who would say, by definition, someone who's mentally ill cannot enter into contracts, cannot agree to certain things, cannot consent to the ultimate decision. And this seems to be like one of those cases. And in Canada, for those of you who don't know, I got shocked and appalled when I found out what was going on in Canada as relates to medically assisted suicide. They call it medical assistance in death in Canada, MAIDs. In 2021, you all know this if you've been following for some period of time. In 2021, Canada euthanized 10,064 Canadians. Euthanized, put an end to the life, the state, through its procedures, 10,000 Canadians. It represented over 3% of the total death in Canada in 2021. In Canada. And that is before the proposed amendment is going to take effect, which was, what did they say? It was called sunset. There was a provision that excluded medical assistance in dying. It excluded the mentally ill from availability to medical assistance in dying for obvious reasons, although it's arguable whether or not they're even allowing it right now. It excluded it for obvious reasons, but then, they had a debate in the Senate, in the government, and they said, well, we can't exclude the mentally ill from being able to kill themselves with the assistance of the state, because that would be discrimination. Our members of parliament sat around and proposed an amendment that says we're only going to exclude the mentally ill from the application of medical assistance in dying for 18 months or something from the enactment of the law. And so that provision has a sunset where it will no longer apply as of, I think, this year, next year. I don't know the exact date. They actually sat around and said, if we exclude the mentally ill from being able to request and obtain medical assistance in dying, that would be discriminatory. So this is coming to Canada. And now we've seen concrete evidence, a hard case, unless there's some radically different details that we don't know or misinformation, a 23-year-old physically healthy woman suffering from depression, taking a lot of medications, it would seem, euthanized. There's no limit. There's no limit. And it will go from the mentally ill, and they say, well, we can't not allow mentally ill children to do this. Oh no, of course not. We wouldn't go there. That would be a bridge too far. And by the way, no thanks. This is global news. How poverty, not pain, is driving Canadians with disabilities to consider medically assisted death. This was one in Canada where a veterans helpline, this is not the story here, but we've talked about it before, recommended it to a veteran calling in for help with PTSD. Hey, you ever thought about killing yourself? You ever thought about medical assistance in dying? You got a bad case of PTSD. I've heard stories, which I can't, I won't get in there. When there's a financial incentive for the state to fast track, green light, and alleviate the burdens on the healthcare system, one can foresee the corruption relatively easily. And I just pulled up a couple of articles a while back. Yeah, this won't cost the healthcare system any money, guys. Don't worry. Euthanizing people won't cost the system anymore. It might actually save some money. What's that? The healthcare system's so overloaded we have to lock everyone down to flatten the curve? It would free up a lot of space, save the government a lot of money if we just let people start to kill themselves willy-nilly and throw in there mental illness, which by definition affects one's ability to make certain decisions. Oh, but I'm sure they'll follow all the protocol. Hello, you've reached the Provincial Health Services Authority telephone line for medical assistance in dying. This is the automated recording Joni Cowie got when she called the government to see if she would be eligible for Medicare assistance in dying, known as MAID. It's an unmistakable message from the government. If you want to end your life, we'll help you. I'm good for global news. When it becomes unpopular, when it becomes popular to criticize the government, then they'll get on the bandwagon. When it's something so shocking and so egregious, 10,000 deaths through euthanasia in Canada in 2021, okay, maybe global news will start to cover it. Oh, Cowie certainly meets the medical. Okay, if you can call the number on the government website, they will provide doctors that will sign off for you, says the 52-year-old resident of Windsor, Ontario. They can have me dead in 90 days. That's what I was told. One woman was euthanized in Canada because she had a severe chemical sensitivity, also known as an allergy, and couldn't find housing to accommodate her. MAID. Enacted in 26, MAID legislation required that death be reasonably foreseeable. However, based on subsequent legal challenges, the legislation was ruled unconstitutional and the rules were changed. Starting last year, anyone who has a serious and incurable illness, disease, or disability that is irreversible with enduring and intolerable suffering became eligible. But critics say the government's quick expansion of MAID and insistence that it's a compassionate thing to do misses an important factor. A massive number of Canadians with disabilities like Cowie are trapped in an excruciating cycle of poverty. This goes on. I'll clip it. It's stating the obvious for anybody who didn't already know it. It's the obvious. And we're gonna see mercy killings. It's the compassionate thing to do. There are people out there. Hold on, sorry. There are people out there who are downtrodden, and I've heard concrete stories of people like, I need other help. Why are you pressuring this on me?